Yeah,
That
what
was a
the heck
wild
happened?
campaign. So, it was a campaign basically centered around Matt's character, a warforged called Innie, who was made of porcelain and basically created as a collector's item in a distant continent for some noble family. Innie escapes, crosses the sea, and basically all the while is kind of seeking to find out more about her race. Kind of how Warforged are created, what's happened with them, and why she's never met another one. So she decides to go to the land of Vandarune, the place where where she's heard kind of kickstarted their construction, and the first place to use them in a war. I'll probably cut the first kind of 5 sessions down to a few sentences because there was very little significant stuff that happened.
Yeah.
But basically, they arrived in the port after the events of a previous one shot, which aren't as important. Found out that there was a library with basically there was kind of a recently finished war between the elves and the humans on this continent, the same continent that this campaign has taken place on. This one shot took place on. And the elves used Warforged in that war, and basically just used them as fodder. They just sent them into battle, no regard for whether they lived or died, to weaken the enemy lines. And doing that, they took over a very large part of the human country. Eventually, though, the Warforged predictably decided they weren't very happy with this arrangement and rebelled, basically just striking at the heart of the Elven Empire from within. The Elven Empire buckled and surrendered, and gave the humans back a very generous portion of their land. And in a shocking act of kindness towards the Warforged, decided to allow them to all live peacefully on a small island off the coast of one of their holy cities, which up until then, only elves had been allowed into the Holy City. They made an exception to allow Warforged in because they were so nice and being peaceful, you know. Very peaceful. The island, on the map I posted, where is it?
It's the bad area.
Yes, you can actually see the island they were sent to live on right above the bad area. It's very small. So, and basically, what the Warforged didn't know was that is a very tempestuous area of sea, which is basically impossible to sail to from anywhere other than that particular port in the holy city that only elves are allowed in. So as soon as they got to the island, the elves trapped them there and have basically just been ruling over them with an iron fist since. Not for any particular political reason, but just as kind of a cruel revenge plot, because elves live a long time, so they hold grudges for a long time. And the players landed in Anthropia, found out that there was something weird going on where a bunch of guards had been sent to a library that served as a repository of human knowledge that the elves had all tried to destroy. They realised that all the guards who'd been sent to kind of check on the mage after kind of some people had failed to return to the library had just vanished. So the party was sent there, and they went up there and found out that the library of human knowledge was actually a bunch of Kenku who had just been read every one of these kind of texts and had them all memorized. The mage in charge of the library and in charge of reading the texts had gone insane due to something that you guys don't really understand because it's a reference to a campaign none of you played. Which is the problem with having my cinematic universe split over 2 different groups. But in effect, they went there tried to interrogate the Mad Mage, hit him a bit too hard and accidentally killed him, and made off with one fellow person, with one Kenku, the one surviving Kenku they could find, whose name was simply Library. And they found out from him that about this pact where the Warforged had been allowed onto a place called Lifelover Island. And they decided to head over there.
Small points. Also, midway through the party's adventure, they were asked to kind of investigate a illicit Warforged sale that was going on.
Oh yes, yes, and basically there was a dwarf illegally selling a Warforged to someone who was working for some warlord on a faraway continent that has in a country that's actually never appeared in any of my campaigns. And they effectively just killed the buyer, stole the Warforged for themselves. That was Spencer's character.
We didn't steal the Warforged. As a matter of fact, the Warforged turned on his previous buyer, killed them, and then joined us.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember the exchange at the end of the buyer's life where she was like, "You're gonna regret this," and my character went, "Rebuttal. I don't think I will."
So yeah, headed over to after that was before the whole island thing had happened, so they headed to the island, crossed the border into Elven territory, and were told by the guards at the border that it was an absolutely abysmal idea to take a Kenku into the Holy Elven City, and that first of all, they would not be able to get into the city, not being elves, other than the two Warforged. And second, they would not, that taking a Kenku into there was going to get the Kenku killed and possibly all of them killed, because the elves know that the humans are using Kenku in order to keep their secrets. They're going to kill any on sight.
Oh my god.
So they headed to the city. Level 1 monk Kenku and and
if I may, there was actually
went down. Yeah, what were you saying that?
Did you remember the part where I left my magical armor with the Kenku?
We'll get to yes, and basically, upon arriving the city, I vividly remember this description of it being a heavily walled city with literally thousands of soldiers standing on top of the wall.
Oh my god, dude.
With no easy-looking way to break in. Innie and Gearbox, who Gearbox is Spencer's Warforged, say, okay, we'll go in, we have free passage there, we can get in there, and once we're in, we'll cause a distraction, and you guys can sneak in at that point, and then we can get to the island together.
My idea of a distraction was to make it look like Innie had tried to stab one of the guards.
Oh, it worked.
So I have a question for you, Stevie. Just a quick poll. How do you think that went?
Not very well.
Not well at all, in fact. Basically, they got into the city and started asking whether they could see kind of the people who'd created Gearbox.
Oh my god.
And the guards were like, no, you're allowed to pass through the city, you're only allowed to pass through the city to get to the island, you can't do anything else. They start getting frog march towards a boat bound for the island.
Oh my god.
Gearbox tries his trick of making it look like glitched and accidentally stabbed one of the guards. The guards did not stop to question whether the stabbing was intentional and immediately just smashed Innie to pieces.
Oh my god.
Basically, at this point, when we were trying to figure out how to get everyone in, Innie, being an armor artificer, the armor will shrink to the size of anyone and can't be removed. So she had put that on the Kenku to protect the Kenku and make it like, oh, the Kenku's just a weird replicant. And prior to that, I should also mention the whole reason the Porcelain Warforged, is an armorer is because, again, Porcelain, she was attacked when she had initially escaped, and entire portion of it was the right arm was broken and gone, so it's just literally just a stubbed end. And Artificer armor, it replaces missing limbs.
Yep.
And so when we were being escorted out, we tried a myriad of things to try and get them to stop, and one of them was even like using a knife and just kind of impaling where that is, and being like, "Oh, I'm wounded, need to go," and they're like, "Nope, not bad enough to go." And then we tried to figure out, and that's when I'll never forget. The gearbox goes, "I'm sorry about this," and just what? And that's when it's the surprise attack. So from my character's perspective, it's literally just, "Sorry about this." Stabs the dude. Immediately, they all just turn around, and just.
Oh my god.
And yes.
Actually, I think I still got her character sheet here. You want take a guess what the max health of the Porcelain Warforged was that was level 5? 17 max health.
Oh god.
Yeah, and yeah, so basically they got bundled and chained in the belly of a ship bound for Life Lover Island. And on the way there, Innie has a dream where we've not really experienced much of it. Stevie, you've never experienced it, and Spencer, you haven't really. But the dream world is a large part of my world. Innie meets a goddess in the dream world, the goddess of light, who also happens to be a Warforged. Basically explains the whole thing about how, like, it's a trick. Life Lover Island wasn't like... It's not like a good place, it's just a prison. And kind of, but I'm sorry I couldn't contact you earlier, and now it's too late to save you from it.
Oh my god.
Meanwhile, the other 3 are attempting to sneak in. So, Nye and Tom's character, along with the Kenku, basically realise there's no way we're getting through the gates. This place is far too well guarded, and if we get seen as non-elves, we will be killed. So they decide to take advantage of the fact that it's a seaside city, and walk on and kind of wait for the cover of night and then go to kind of one of the edges of the wall, which the city is aside a massive cliff. They carefully climb down the cliff, at which point Library, the Kenku, leaves behind the armour that Innie had, and Katie leaves behind a magic staff and all of the rest of her possessions aside from her gold, and like one weapon.
God, dude.
So basically they realise we're not going to be able to swim with any of our stuff on them. All of them have to leave pretty much everything behind. They swim and end up finding a cave, which they think they can use to get into the city. Turns out, the cave has already been found and taken over by the criminal underground of the city, who specialise in getting people into the city who aren't elves, and just by way of this cave system and disguise self. Nye and Tom ask how much it's going to cost. The criminal extorts them for all of their money. And to give them passage through and scrolls of disguise self. And long story short, they manage to sneak onto another ship bound for the island. But it's been a while. They arrive like after the other 2 have already been on there for basically an entire day.
Yeah.
On the island. God, I just realised we're like barely even close to the end of this.
Yep.
This is the part where the campaign got split into 3 separate storylines, which I had to then try and bring back together in some way.
Oh no!
So, Innie and Gearbox were both taken to separate parts of the island. Innie was taken to the prison segment where she was put in a cell with someone who they referred to as the Oathbreaker, who had a scratched out mark of that goddess of light, the goddess of the Warforged, who had kind of her own semi-political reasons for not intervening in this torture of thousands of well, actually it was about 300 Warforged on the island. But yeah, she basically couldn't interfere because it would cause a war between the gods. And basically this paladin that Innie meets has become an Oathbreaker, having become incredibly angry at the fact that what's meant to be the Warforged patron goddess is not helping.
Oh my god.
Matt, with some like very good, really good actually, navigation of like the conversation, manages to convince her that there might be a chance of escape without getting stabbed. And basically begins to devise an escape plan, kind of transforming a table leg into an implement to try and pop open the lock, and then find how to deal with the swarming masses of guards later. Gearbox, meanwhile...
Yeah, we could gloss over that. Long and short of it, Gearbox met the guy who built him, offered to send him to that tumultuous warland with a memory wipe. Gearbox refused, tried to fight him, got beaten, and wound up disappearing until the final battle.
One small detail I want to add. He escaped. He got out of one of the windows. This laboratory was in the summit of the mountain. He got through one of the windows and was out on the mountain and was free to climb down. Then he went back to try and get another shot in, allowing the guy to cast heat metal. Which, against a thing made of metal, heat metal is a slight problem. You can probably deduce why.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
not my proudest moment, but it made sense for Gearbox because he was getting content.
Gearbox falls unconscious and is taken into the lab, and yeah, as Spencer said, vanishes until the final battle. Meanwhile, Katie and Keldon are both kind of just having their exploration of the island. This was heartbreaking to watch, because the two of them were basically just walking around the island going, hey, isn't this where the Warforged all live happily? Why isn't there a Warforged city anywhere around here? And, yeah. They end up kind of deciding, I think they just spent a bit of time exploring the island, trying to gather the ingredients so that Tom could recast Find Familiar after he sacrificed his previous familiar in a bid to distract a guard to sneak onto the boat. And he, so they cast Find Familiar to basically scout the place out. And they're just kind of in hiding. Meanwhile, Innie escapes the cell, kills like 4 guards along with the paladin's help, and before escaping, the paladin requests that they go downstairs to the bottom level of the prison where the king of the island is being held. And kind of, he was their king, the one who started the rebellion, the one who made it, who kind of set everything into motion. But he was also Corla's friend, kind of the closest person in the world to her, so she wanted to go and save him before doing anything else. They get to the room. He was killed long ago, and the remaining scraps of him are still on display in this room. So,
I did not hear this part of the story.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Paula, the Paladin, the Oathbreaker Paladin, this prompts her to reform her oath, changing from an oath of devotion to an oath of vengeance, and swearing that she will kill whoever's responsible. So the two of them kind of just run around the island together, run around the prison, freeing all the replicants they can find. Replicants is another word for Warforged, sorry, I didn't say that earlier. Yeah, freeing all the Warforged they can find. Basically, eventually they just become an army. A tide just overwhelming any guards they find. And they've got their rebellious force. Katie and Keldon, meanwhile, are spotted by a guard. And being spotted as a non-elf within the city would be bad enough. Being spotted as a non-elf on the super secret island is basically instant death. So Nye's character, the one who was spotted, runs out from hiding to try and distract them, and basically just is fighting 6 guards with crossbows, all shooting at her, instantly gets downed.
Lord.
And I am amazed Nye didn't die. Tom steps out and casts... What's the spell? It's something about lightning. Yeah, lightning bolt, which is a 100-foot line blasting out, and it's basically the equivalent of fireball but in a line, which is perfect for the situation because all the guys are in a line. He kills 4 of the guards outright. Oh no, sorry, he gets 4 of the guards really low, outright. Doesn't kill them. None of them are dead. They all train their crossbows on him, and then Library, the Kenku, steps out of hiding, knowing this will attract the attention of the guards, and basically just screams an ancient warrior's phrase about how the Emperor, insulting the Emperor of the Elves, getting all the crossbows trained on him, and just getting outright killed immediately.
Oh my god.
This enrages Tom, who casts a second lightning bolt, taking out 5 of the guards, leaving only one standing, the captain. The captain charges him. He's a wizard. He's not got much health. This seems like it's going to be where he dies. Makes 2 attacks, both hit. He casts shield and turns them both into misses. And I described it as kind of, she lunges at him and then the shield forms around the sword, not allowing her to take it back. And then on his turn, he casts Shatter just on her armour. The armour just blasts inwards and kills her. And at that point, Corla, Inni, and the Warforged army come out of the mountain, see the dead Library, and kind of 3 out of 4 of the party are finally reunited. So now we're entering the very last session of this campaign. So to start with, the Warforged begin to form into ranks, basically forming a military ranks against the Elven Guards who are left on the island, who are kind of forming into ranks of their own, preparing themselves for battle. The players and the Paladin all head upwards to find the dwarf and who created Gearbox and him. They walk into the room. The dwarf is in the centre waiting for them. Gearbox is beside them. Beside him with no memory of the rest of the party.
if I may, there is one thing I want to bring up here, since it's about to reach the combat thing.
Yep.
This is when I got to do the full purpose of my build.
Yep.
This is, if I'm not mistaken, it was blur and mirror image.
Yes, it was.
So at this point, I had, let me see, 23 AC with blur and mirror image, meaning, if I'm not mistaken, it was disadvantage on attacks against me, and then if they did hit, they're basically just going to get one of my mirror images.
Yes, correct. And yeah, basically in the final battle, it kind of begins diverging into two battles, where it's Keldon, the wizard, against Gearbox, just kind of fighting one-on-one. Keldon not really fighting back, just trying to convince him to join them again and trying to get him to remember. Gearbox is having to make saves in order to see if he remembers anything.
Never rolled higher than an 11.
Yeah.
The real kicker was I got my first attack against him was a nat 20.
Oh, crit.
Yeah,
cut
nat
out
20.
there.
Yeah.
And meanwhile the other ones are all going for the wizard. Sorry, for the dwarf, who turns out to be an artificer who's quite proficient in combat. Actually, I've still got a sheet around. Let me find it. Actress.
Ezra.
Yeah, Ezra. I just searched his name. And yeah, he is basically just very happily taking the paladin and the other two party members on 3-on-1. He's got a couple of other robots to help, but they're nothing too kind of hard to take on.
This was the guy who tried to take on Solo.
Yes, the final boss.
Oh my god.
So here is his character. He was quite strong. And yeah, he also just kind of took so he, to put it simply, he at one point he saw the paladin attempting to cast a healing spell to get the downed Katie, Nye's character, back up. Immediately just casts haste on himself and just pummels the paladin with attacks until she's down. This was how I was running this fight. If you're seen casting a healing spell, he is hard targeting you until you're dead. So she goes down, Katie's down. It's basically just Gearbox, but Keldon finally manages to get Gearbox to remember who he really is. And so it's now transitioned to practically a 3-on-1. But it's around this point that Innie's concentration on Innie gets hit for the first time properly, not the mirror image. Concentration on blur gets broken. And the damage kind of just comes cascading in.
Yeah. I mean, there was, like 4 things attacking me at once?
Yeah.
Like, there was...
Took a solid 8 rounds for them to even land a hit.
Pretty much,
I mean, it was a little ridiculous. It was kind of one of those things where it's like, you're holding back the flood, but once that first leak starts, the water's coming through.
And yeah, so Innie's still kind of holding out. And then, yeah, Innie's still kind of standing, noticing that Gearbox has changed sides. Azaran decides to go after those two instead. Basically just hastes his way over to, with an absurd movement speed, hastes his way to the entire other side of the map, and just downs Keldon in one hit.
Oh my god.
Innie also goes down, at some point in here.
And I, on 10 HP, have to go on a stealth mission.
Yeah, Gearbox hides, gets over to some healing potions that were in the lab, kind of looks around seeing who he can give one to, and then realizes he cannot drink it. He cannot, give it to anyone without dying, so he just drinks it. Also finds a potion of heroism, which lets everyone add 1d4 to their rolls for the next minute, which helps a lot.
Save Tom from 2 nat 1 death stays.
Yeah.
Oh my god, dude.
The guy is basically just holding Calvin up by the neck, threatening to kill him unless Gearbox shows himself. So Gearbox shows himself, takes an attack, tries to hide again. He charges towards where Gearbox was, and they basically just begin 1v1ing.
Cat and mouse.
Yep.
And eventually what brings it into the open is me finding a bottle of poison.
Yep. That was a cool moment. And yeah, just jamming it down his throat, kind of break his concentration on haste, which caused him to pause for a round, crucially. And then Innie rolls a nat 20 on death saves, which lets her get back up.
Well, point of clarity, she'd initially rolled a nat 20 during the cat and mouse stage and got knocked down immediately after.
Oh yeah,
I did take down... Don't forget, there were still like 1 or 2 of the things on me, so when I had gotten up, I was able to take another down. The problem was my AC was too high that even when I was like prone, they couldn't beat my AC.
Yeah. And yeah, Innie basically just jumps on the dwarf's back, punches him a couple of times. He swings around, downs her in one sword slash, and then says to his 2 remaining robot minions, make sure she stays down. So they walk up and begin attacking her.
But her armor was too strong.
Yeah, her armor was too strong and they did not manage to get through. Gearbox dodges a couple of attacks. Innie rolls another nat 20. And look behind Azerin, hits him another couple of times.
I think on that one I actually had just taken out the 2 that were on me.
Oh yeah, you did, yes.
Well,
and then... but you then came and hit him, also giving Gearbox sneak attack, I believe, which allowed him to get a really good hit in, basically taking the dwarf down to his last legs of HP.
Oh, wait, no, okay, hold on. This one I do thoroughly remember.
Yep.
Because, yeah, it was after I had knocked the 2 down, he came over, knocked me down again, stepped on the head, and then...
Actually, he just, Wait, was this the death? Or...
No, this was before.
Oh no, yeah.
And then went back over, and that was
when
when I got my third natural 20. Stood up,
giving Gearbox sneak attack.
And I used my action for the armor effect to give myself a shield buffer of health.
Yeah.
But seeing me get up a third time was enough that he, in a rage, ran over and in one clean hit did enough damage to flat out
outright kill. Yeah.
Yeah, and
actually, that's the part I'm actually mad at myself for, because basically, during the battle, he just kind of said, if I'm going to die here, you're going to die with me. And right after the session, I just wrote a way better script for what he could have said.
Don't
basically, yeah, the improved script was, you are the reason for all this. Sorry, Alf.
You're fine.
Doing his voice hurts.
You good?
You are the reason Life Lover Island rose. You. Well, maybe I am damned to walk through Taro's gate, and maybe it is my fate for a replicant to send me there. If so, then so be it. But me and you, we will walk through together! And then just takes a buffed up slash using his last Searing Smite, and does something like 27 damage.
Exactly.
Oh my
Actually, I have
God.
it still written down. It puts Innie at negative 21 health.
Yeah.
Which,
Oh my
keep in mind, her
God.
max is 17.
In fact,
So
I
it
can.
was.
Sorry if this is mean, but I can pin the roll that killed her.
Hey, it's fine.
And the big and like I couldn't even save her with a nat 20 on my opportunity attack.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah.
and then I
it was
managed to land a sneak attack, which I learned after dealt pretty much enough damage to kill him.
Yeah, I believe he had 12 health left, and you dealt 14 damage with your last attack. If
Yeah,
I'm
and
remembering right.
what I did was I stabbed him in the shoulder and said, "Statement: You don't deserve last words, meatbag," and just beheaded him in a simple manner.
Yeah.
And then his.
then,
Don't forget, you explicitly stated as well on that sword strike that killed Innie that it was basically from like the midsection, the upper half of the bite just severed from the lower half.
Yep.
Yeah, I was actually picturing it a bit less like that. The way I was picturing it was he just kind of rakes his sword up from the midsection to the throat, and just the sheer force of the blow just causes Innie to shatter, the wooden frame revealed underneath, and that just kind of collapses and shatters on the floor.
We said a little bit of upper head at least for our final
Yes,
word.
definitely. Yes,
Yeah.
that was the frame kind of got damaged, but didn't fully shatter, and she got some final words. And then let me just read the script for the ending out as a whole, because it was I was really proud of it.
The important thing, I want to bring out some character stuff. The whole reason we were actually seeking out Gearbox's makers was because Innie saw what they did to Gearbox, creating replicants that are solely driven on killing
Yeah.
as like kind of abominable, and so she wanted to kill his makers,
Yep.
And
and then
Gearbox
kind
at
of
the
had
time wasn't
an
aware of
epiphany.
it.
Yeah, and I don't think she ever made that aware to him, kind of as a shame that she realized, especially because their bond kind of really reaffirmed on the lower deck of the ship
Yeah.
when they came together to agree on the saving the other replicants.
Yep.
And hey, Gearbox has her head, so maybe she can come back.
Yeah. Also, yeah, so the yeah, this was the script for the kind of ending cutscene of the campaign, which I'm very proud of, so I just want to read it out in full. A great cheer resounds from the plain outside, and looking out, you see that the Elven line has buckled under the pressure, the formation now scattered, and the few remaining guards now being hunted by the replicant army. Shouts of triumph and celebration echo up, but keening wails rise above them. Amidst the crumpled plate mail and shattered bodies of the Elven guards lie blood-stained steel scraps, the only remnant of roughly half the replicant army. Another replicant staggers into the room. Her design was seemingly once similar to Corla's, though she has been half torn apart, a forearm missing and sections of her chest ripped out, exposing runes and wires beneath. Her speech is ragged and tortured. Queen Corla! Using her remaining hand, she points out of one of the windows on the far side of the room, the one which gives a view of the sea, and on the far horizon, the port from which you were all brought. And minuscule at first, you can make out shapes on the horizon. Dozens of sails, galleons bearing standards with a golden arrow of glass on them, the symbol of the army of Toneports. With a struggle, Corla lifts herself from the ground and lurches towards the opposite window, casting one more spell as she comes into the view of her soldiers. Her voice, now magically enhanced, booms across the field. Replicants of Lifelove Island, the battle is not yet over. She gestures towards the sea. We have scant hours before the Elven fleet is upon us. When you've all recovered, archers form a squad at the beach, majors behind them. The rest of you, I want half to the bottom chamber of this mountain. There's lime deposits there, mine them and bring them to the furnaces up here. The rest of you salvage what material you can from the guardhouse and temple. Start building catapults. As the soldiers below form into their respective squads, you see the new replicant giving Corla a puzzled look. Don't you remember, Kairos? The naval battles in the south? Near those mountains? The weapons they used? Kairos suddenly nods in understanding. I do. Mycerian sea fight. That's genius. As Corla steps away from the window and turns to you, you see that her face is contorted in grim determination. Hey, they kill them. Gearbox. We're going to give them hell. End of campaign.
I remember. Yeah, I remember distinctly Gearbox interjecting at some point.
Yes,
Query.
Gearbox asked if he can help.
Query. How can I help?
Yeah.
Which is a far cry from how he was at the start of the campaign.
Yes.
We
Also,
call a lot of character
one
development.
one little tidbit that people probably didn't pick up on. Well, it was just a small world building detail they never elaborated on. But when they talked about Massyrian sea fire, that's basically the equivalent of Greek fire, the
That's what
naval
I meant.
weapon. Yeah, and that's made using limestone. Hence why she wanted them to mine limestone.
So yeah,
And
that was Locks and Libraries.
Yep.
Oh,
And in
geez.
all my
That
time
was
of playing, that was my first character death.
Yeah, that was the best campaign I've ever run.
Yeah, it's the only campaign so far that I've run to completion that isn't a one shot.
Yeah,
And honestly, Gearbox is the character that I would have wanted to do it. Like I initially made him as
yeah,
I initially made him as a kind of shout out to HK-47 from Knights of the Old
yeah,
Republic.
but he really kind of came into his own a few sessions in.
Yep.
I think my only regret with that campaign is that aside from the fight and recruiting Gearbox, nothing interesting happened for like the first 4 sessions. And then I feel like once you got to like the island with the Kenku, I kind of found my groove, and like I just felt like everything after that was just best session I've ever run. Okay, I taught myself that's the best session I've ever run.
And apparently he ran the last camp session with no notes.
Not the last session, the last but one.
Mm.
The last session I had the final boss made from a bit earlier, but the last session I was running with the character sheet. But the session before, where it was just Innie kind of creating the replicant army and the other two infiltrating the island, that was run with no notes whatsoever. I just had a vision of what I wanted to do, and I just went for it.
Oh my gosh.